Thank
Super.
you very much for your time, colleagues. I have with me, this is Mike Anthony at the University of Michigan. I have the pleasure of a colleague from the University of Texas Medical Branch, Lee Webster. And of course, we have the trusty Christine here. And Lee is going to bring us up to date on three ISO standards for which the United States, through ANSI, is the secretariat. So Lee's the first name on all these. So I'll just say here that this is a standard, and it looks like I probably should have changed this. When I get this formatted correctly, I'll get this all fixed. But why don't you go ahead, Lee, and bring us up to date on the human resource management standard, please.
Fantastic, and thank you, Mike and Christine. Again, my name is Lee Webster, and I just wanted to brief the listeners to what's going on in developing the international HR standards and also a new international standards effort that was just approved by the international members of ISO in the area of healthcare administration. Starting with human resources, recently there has been approved a new work on a proposal to create a standard for global diversity and inclusion. We're excited about that because we think that is a topical subject. Many countries are interested in how the United States views diversity and inclusion, and they themselves are thinking about how they might introduce those concepts into their own countries, particularly when the issues are often more about cross-cultural diversity than they are race or gender. So we have a committee starting, and it will meet for the first time, or at least have an informal meeting for the first time at our Singapore plenary meeting, which will occur in late August, early September.
So now,
there's also
is that the meeting for the human resource standard, and then this will be a break off, a task group?
Yes, this will be its own working group within that technical committee.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut over to the sheet where we have you can keep talking, but I want to get to the human resource management standard. And I think we actually even put it in our 9 squares. So
Sure.
This is the root standard. This used to be run by SHRM. Is that right?
Yes.
And then SHRM gave it up, and then you brought it from ANSI has then assigned the secretariat, at least you're the chairman of the ANSI tag for this. So we have had some coverage. And so when you refer to Singapore, you're referring to this group. That's where they get. And then those same people will likely, whoever's there, will likely be the ones who try to get this moving then. Okay.
Yes, that is correct.
All right.
And then at the same meeting, we're continuing the work we mentioned, or I think I mentioned in our previous recording, developing a global standard for human capital reporting. That standard is one where the value of human capital will be determined in a way that is consistent across the globe, so that if an investor is looking at an annual report or a 10K and wants to make a decision about whether to invest in a company or not based upon how they manage their workforce, you would have consistent common metrics for that investor to do that with, or the board to do it with, or even management. So that group is being led by the Germans. It's going to be its own work group within this same technical committee. So we're very excited about that. Also, another group submitted a proposal to create a new standard in the area of time and attendance. That appears to be a much more eclectic activity than even I recognize, where lots of countries have different points of view of what a FTE is, how to measure people's time at work or not. And so we're very interested in that. The international community is currently voting on that, and it looks very promising that there'll be a standard project internationally in that regard too. Last thing about health and human resources is sometime this year, the global standard for recruitment will be published for workforce planning, for the terms of human resource management, or the glossary of human resource management, and finally one for the concept called human governance, which is the degree to which boards should be involved in workforce matters in the organization. So we expect all 4 of those to get published sometime later this year.
Okay.
So with all that happening,
that's a lot. So so whenever people are flying off to Singapore, what kind of how many countries are going to be able to get there? I guess that's the question. How many people will be at that meeting, do you think?
Well, in our experience, it averages in around 15 or so countries show up to all of our meetings. We have 38 countries in the technical committee, and the challenge is, depending upon what part of the world you're in, it's always expensive to get to one of these meetings. So we anticipate we'll have a fairly robust participation of our members that are from Asia or the Pacific Rim. But I also have heard that people from Western Europe are going to be attending, and of course we in the United States and Canada, we already know that they're serious about attending too. Do you think they're expecting somewhere around 15 to 20.
Do you think there'll be a chance for attending by teleconference? I know that ITU is doing more of that. They're having a Internet of Everything, smart city, global meeting on it, and
right.
I'd have to say, if you don't have the resources, do you have your venue? Do you know who in Singapore is going to be giving you your meeting space?
Yes, we're really excited about this. Let me answer your first question first about having a virtual port for the meeting. I personally think it's a great idea, but I don't think the rest of the members have had an opportunity to soak on that idea, and so it probably won't occur at this meeting, but it may be something, at least it's something I will recommend we bring up in this meeting so that the rest of the members can consider this as a possibility. So that's for the virtual part. As far as the venues, we're really excited. Spring, which is the standard setting body for the ANSI for Singapore, is going to offer space for us, has offered space for us for the plenary itself. So the last 2 days of our meeting is covered by the Spring organization. We'll be meeting in their headquarters. But the earlier part of the week, which for many standards developing bodies is usually used for working groups to meet, we are fortunate that McGraw-Hill has offered for us to use their conference or meeting space for our working groups, and Aon Hewitt in Singapore have offered it as well. So we believe we have plenty of space. They're about 3 blocks away from each other. Plenty of space in Singapore to meet and for the working groups, and as I said, we have the Spring headquarters for the plenary at the end of the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, McGraw-Hill, my old, actually still is my publisher, by gosh. Well, a Singapore meeting is usually a $10,000 trip, and sometimes gets outside the realm of many others. And of course, I try to draw the conversation toward how this has meetings for state level, labor boards, where, as I like to say, infrastructure doesn't vote, but people who work on infrastructure vote. These standards, the ISO standards, are standards that inform regulators in all nations, and whether or not the United States Department of Labor or the Health and Human Services, any federal agency that's in the business of trying to govern the way labor practices are executed, that it's optional, of course, for us to use it, for them to use it. But I always have to say that these are international standards, and to the extent that you want labor markets to be competitive, or you want them to at least to compete on a level playing field, then the United States should be knowing what's going on in the Chinese labor market, the Indian labor market, and right away when you start talking like that, you get people's attention.
Right. I firmly agree with you, and that's one of the reasons why I felt it was important to make progress in developing these international standards of human resource management, and also why the International Labor Organization is a liaison in this. They recognize that as far as they have gotten with this effort, it would be to their advantage to see us make some success in the management side of the labor activities within it, or the employee activities within an organization. So we're excited about that. But then from the standpoint of the new technical committee, recently the members of ISO have voted, and the vote concluded in mid-March, to allow the creation of a new technical committee that the United States sponsored and that we at UTMB helped draft, and that was for the creation of a standard for or technical committee in the area of healthcare administration standards. The theory behind that is that the substantial amount of the cost of the healthcare, at least in the United States, and we believe in other parts of the world, is in its back office, is in the functional activities that help support the clinical care, not the clinical care itself. If you use the United States as an example, about 35 to 30% of the total cost of your healthcare dollar is the actual treatment or drugs you receive. Most of it is folks like me in HR, IT, finance, facility, that kind of thing, supply chain. And our experience looking at other healthcare organizations and even looking at our own is that can be a mangled mess of practices and approaches, some of them not very current, not the best use of technology, not the best use of thinking. Some of them good, but it's not consistent. And so the goal of the International Healthcare Administration Standards is to identify those effective practices and metrics that allow an organization to actually be effective in providing those back office support activities to the healthcare provider, and then obviously share that across the globe. We have very strong support from our international partners or international members of ISO, and we have growing support from healthcare providers in the United States who see this not as a conflict with the traditional clinical side of standardization and metrics, see this as an augment and a necessary augmentation of that. An example I think I can mention openly is the CEO of Aetna and I, through his EVP, have been in direct communication about getting Aetna involved in developing not only the American national standards in this space, but also these international standards. And they're very eager to see this move forward. I've talked to the folks in Disney. They're very eager to see what happens with this. I've even talked to the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. He's looking at this and has even forwarded my name to one of his direct reports to see where this can go. And finally, I've reached out to the the World Health Organization, and I'm in touch with one of their senior doctors to talk to them about maybe we can work together to make sure that we're creating the right kind of standards to meet the needs of the international community. So we're very excited about this. Next steps are, once this vote has been ratified by the Technical Management Board at ISO, then a country, we believe it will be the United States, will be directed to identify a chairperson, and the United States through ANSI will be the secretary. We expect that in time, we hope that ANSI will see it as beneficial for us to take over those responsibilities. And we believe the first international meeting for healthcare administration standards will occur in early part of next year. In the meantime, we're going to have our first national healthcare administration meeting occur sometime in the mid-fall. And that's where we are.
Well, that's quite a mouthful here. Well, you're a busy guy, Lee. So again, to remind the education industry that while we are a local, while education is generally a local kind of an enterprise, we are seeing that while the academic side has long had a collaborative relationship with international colleagues, the administration and the business side of the education industry in the United States is not that far along, or doesn't feel the immediate need for it. But what I see, especially in the healthcare administration standard, well, actually, I can't say that. I see a trend where a lot of commerce will be going between borders, between national borders. A lot of political rhetoric, discussion about fair trade, and of course, we have specific examples where people will say, "Well, I'm going to go to India to get my appendix taken out because it's 1/10 of the cost." Why might that be?
Right.
It might be because it doesn't. You don't create a paper trail behind you like you do here in the United States for probably all the right reasons. So, regardless, that still adds administrative costs, and I don't think anybody who's been with the present state of healthcare administration cannot say that there's paperwork. A lot of that is regulations, and we'll have to interact with other nations that don't have the same, let's say, the litigation environment that the United States has. And so that complicates this. So if we expect the United States to be competitive, at least the academic medical centers are going to be competitive, then it strikes me that they have to be ready to compete against maybe the Canadians or the Mexicans or the Indians or wherever else healthcare is delivered. So that's why this is important now. And I don't think just because it's global doesn't mean it's going to happen slower. I would argue because it is happening globally, it's going to happen faster than what we might see at the same time.
I agree with that. And Mike, just one other thing I'd like to add to this is that we have research now. There's not a lot of research about healthcare administration, by the way. It's kind of surprising. So, and for us, it's a wonderful thing because this could be the cottage industry that we develop here at University of Texas. But of the research that does exist, what we're finding is not only if you run your healthcare organization more effectively from a business standpoint or a management standpoint, it not only reduces costs and provides more value to people involved, but also from a clinical standpoint, it tends to increase patient satisfaction. That means the experience they have in the healthcare queue feels better for them, but also outcomes of their treatment are better, which intuitively makes sense, but there's not a lot of research. But there is some now. So we believe if we can get our arms around healthcare administration, we not only can improve the efficiency of the enterprise, but we can improve the efficacy of the treatment that they receive. And the other side, from an international standpoint, is the developing countries are particularly interested in this because, to lack of a better term, this is a poor man's consultancy or poor woman's consultancy. Rather than spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars that they often can't afford to bring up their healthcare systems to a level of effectiveness that they would like to have, they can now enjoy these standards as a way to identify what the gap is between where they are and where they would like to be or would need to be, and then start pursuing those to fill those gaps rather than spending a lot of money trying to determine what they are. So lots of opportunity here.
I agree. One of the big products of ISO, it strikes me, is I was there, I talked to Kevin McKinley, I think it was whenever I was there last fall, that we have to visualize developing nations that don't have a middle class. They've gone from lower than middle class to they made a jump, and the sort of intermediate managers that you need to make these economies work simply isn't there. That management infrastructure simply isn't there. And so this certainly allows them, as we like to say, the second mouse gets the cheese. They're learning from what the mistakes of the developed nations, and pretty soon these developing nations will be our competitors because they've learned from everything we did wrong.
Yes, I agree.
That's a big market for ISO. Go ahead.
These standards will be the playbook for the middle management class that emerges, and it actually will create an opportunity, a reason for a class of middle management to occur, because these will be their tools. These are not the tools of the CEO of the organization. These are the tools of the managers and the directors so that they can operate the organization more efficiently. But in countries that don't have a infrastructure or a history of having this reservoir of practices and metrics to use, these standards will provide it. So we're really excited about it. Also, the other principle that I tell people is for those countries, those entities that have, best-in-class practices, very often best-in-class can be wasteful because, and it may be my own personal view, but very often being best at most things or everything is not necessary. It's necessary to be effective in most things, best in those things that matter for you or your customers or your strategy. So what these standards will do is it'll give organizations an opportunity to make wiser decisions about where they want to place their resources. Do I want to be, going back to the HR standards, best in everything, or maybe should I just be best in how we recruit? And I'm okay being effective in how we compensate or how we train, because my strategy says we want to recruit the best people. So right now we don't have that, but we'll soon have that, and now I think HR professionals and organizations will make wiser, more pragmatic decisions about how they're going to use their resources to help achieve their organizational goals. And that's why we're excited about the HR1 as well.
Okay. Well, I think we're getting close to 3 o'clock here. With some consideration, I wanted to let you know we're meeting with the chair, at least the secretariat for ISO 288. Is that right, Christine?
Well, I don't know if she's the secretariat. I think South Korea is secretariat.
Oh, so who are we meeting with at 3 o'clock?
Her name is...
The lady from Mexico. That's right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, Lee, so I guess we're going to see you here at the company member forum in about 2-3 weeks here or so. We'll look forward to that. You can meet Christine and our team here. So I'm grateful for the time you spent here. We'll upload this just as we'll call this an afternoon with S. Lee Webster. And I know that people are very eager to know about this, and we like to always touch these standards to know where they're going. As we started talking about earlier, that we may have 8,760 standards we're watching every year, but not all of them are moving at the same time, and even if they are moving, they're moving very slowly. So to sort of keep abreast of what's happening here is very important, and this will add to the update that we had last in January, and I'll put it up on our website at some point. You can view it, and we'll probably clean up this page a bit. But I guess I wanted to say thanks very much for your time, and I think we're simply going to see you here in about 3 weeks.
You will, and again, thank you, both Christine and you, Mike, for giving me an opportunity to speak to your listeners about what we're doing.
Okay, great. Take care, Lee. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.